The recording. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Roundtable Scalar Darwinism. Is there an alternative to contemporary AI? This roundtable is a critical examination of the directionality, ontology, and developmental logic of contemporary artificial intelligence through an experimental framework proposed here under the title Scalar Darwinism. Modern AI, characterized by its proprietary regimes, uniformist and essentialist presuppositions, its data-centric ontology, and the priority of quantity as a measure of progress, closely aligns with the sum of economical, sum of fluxes of economical, social, historical trajectories described by Mark Fisher, K. Punk, as capitalist realism. Capitalist realism, along with the current big tech, who actively participate as architects of capitalist realism order of things, reciprocally implicate one another, amplifying the impression that just as there appears to be no meaningful qualitative alternative to capitalism, there are no genuine alternatives to AI research and development beyond its current trajectory, which is instantly inflating data-hungry models of transformer architecture without any substantive qualitative shifts at all. The Roundtable offers a critical exploration of this status quo by firstly ungrounding its presuppositions and asking whether there are any lines of flight viable at all that can effectively function as meaningful alternatives to the current condition of scalarity. My name is Mstyslav Kazakov. I'm Ukrainian philosopher based in Kyiv. I'm PhD in philosophy, particularly in dialectics and methodology of cognition, of academic rank of associate professor of philosophy department at Kyiv Polytechnic Institute, named after Igor Sikorsky, which is also my primarily affiliation institution. I'm also an alumnus of Transdisciplinary Studies certificate program of the new Center for Research and Practice. And aside from students, I also give lectures to my fellow colleagues at Postgraduate Institute with the course AI in Educators Activities. My recent research-related projects include keynote lectures for Budapest workshop on philosophy of technology and being ranked 14th out of 1,108 overall contributors in creation of the well-known AI benchmark of this year, known by its dramatic title, Humanity's Last Exam. I am also currently a member of Pan-European Network for Responsible AI Multi-Sector Master's Program, an international endeavor of 16 institutions, which plans its pilot programs to be scheduled at late 2026. Not limited to philosophy of AI, with my interests spanning theory fiction, speculative realism, and particularly metaphysics of pessimism and temporality. This year I struck a deal to have my first book, Geology of the Night, toward the Critique of Diachronic Reason, be published by Zero Books in the middle of 2026 with the current work in progress. I think that's all about me and about this seminar. Let's dive into the things which are far more interesting than telling you about myself. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see.
Great. We'll just use my as a remote controller. So continue to share. And so let's start from lyrical part, so to speak. As you know, the first lecture is titled like that, but that's not of great importance. So here you can see Colossus. More precisely, its construction site. It's a supercomputer owned by Elon Musk's XAI. I think some of you happen to know this. So it was built in breakneck speed of 122 days, just in 4 months. I'm sorry. For some reason, it doesn't. It works. It boasts characteristics unmatched across proprietary hardware, because its current compute resource is at least 200,000 GPUs, but I think it's more because this is from the claim like 2 months ago or something like that. It has exabyte of storage. It boasts also 3 and 6 terabits with bandwidths, and total memory bandwidths being like 194 petabytes. Its central building or central cooling tower area take, as you can see, the size about 13 football fields. What official statement of XAI doesn't tell us is its daily, for example, electricity consumption rates, which is, as you can see, 115 megawatts per day. Its daily water consumption is 100,000 households per year, which is million gallons of water a day. It has, you can see these red spots. These are actually methane tubes, which are used, methane fuel turbines that work for fueling the machine 24 hours and 7 days a week. Estimations vary on how much these plumes from generator and turbines boost the city smog. City smog in West Memphis, which is already in dire ecological situation, with cancer rates more than average throughout the country. But the baseline is like 1/3, 30% of all the pollution in the region, and the upper is 2/3 actually, or 130 tons of nitrogen oxides emissions per year. Sorry, South Memphis, not West Memphis. So even before Big Tech arrival, cancer rates predominantly among Black majority of locals, who are the majority actually, was 4 times bigger. So why did I brought here the case of Colossus if it is not even a part of the list of top 500, the most powerful, the fastest exascaling computers like El Capitan, Frontier, Aurora, and other, so to say, exascale Olympians. What makes Colossus of Elon Musk truly remarkable in its is its purpose, the cause of its actual creation, and the drive of the pace it has materialized as if out of nowhere for only 4 months. Because unlike flagships, which I have mentioned, like El Capitan or Frontier, which are used for exascale computing fleets for Navy, they are deployed for nuclear stockpiles, stewardship, national energy infrastructure management, large-scale simulations for cutting-edge applied and fundamental research, pushing the frontiers of contemporary open science and technology. The first and the foremost task of Colossus, contrary to all of them, is one, to train and provide a compute to Grok, the company's LLM chatbot. So with a sum of vertiginous magnitudes and audacious expansion map, because they plan to expand at least to, for example, 1 million of GPUs, which would match the national exascale computers. With this skyrocketing voraciousness, nation scale pollution, which is divided, all this is being divided like by this funny penny ant denominator, this teleology. So by this means, in this sense, Colossus is also an epitome, a sign of the times that embodies the logic, the very logic at the heart of modern AI systems. Because, well, it is far from certain whether this is a milestone at all, but there is no doubt that Colossus can serve as a monument to scalarity. Scalarity as a concept here is used similarly to the diagnostic function invoked by Jean-François Lyotard when he used or introduced his term postmodernity, because postmodernity also was a diagnostic thing, like the diagnosis of human condition of his time, proceeding from knowledge, from science, and moving further. In this sense, I use term not scale, but scalarity, just as postmodernity. Why so? In domains of mathematics and physics, we have vectors that refer to physical quantity with more than one tuple of properties, meaning like magnitude plus something else. For example, Euclidean geometric vectors or vector spaces, time, as they mention, mass, density, extension field velocity, speed, distance, force, vectors, polynomial rings, many things. Best of all, they are known that they all have direction. In their turn, scalars are also mathematical and mathematical only entities that denote sheer magnitudes that are devoid of any property as such, aside from quantity. And we may say that, like in technical philosophical terms, we may say that this is a pure size or pure amount without qualitative dimensionality, which is basically the same, and any specified directionality. And when we ruminate on the nature of what is today proposed to be called general purpose AI systems, because we already have at least 2 GPS, so GP systems, one pass. The logic of development of what is proposed to be called this way, because this is far from certain that they are really general purpose systems. The ontology, metaphysical assumption that underpins the industry is scalarity. So what we see here is a spheric inflation of transformers with attention feed-forward mechanisms and so on and so forth. What actually is meant by progressive movement or evolution occurs at scale and for scale. This in turn leads to assumption that just as postmodernity was to knowledge, postmodernity and knowledge relation, because we shouldn't forget that Lyotard's assessment proceeds precisely from the science of his time. Scalarity in similar respect functions as episteme, meaning here concept by which Michel Foucault referred to the configuration and parametric properties of the assemblage of power and knowledge. As Foucault had it, there is nothing more telling, actually, of the episteme, which defines the regimes of knowledge functioning, than archives. It generates the piles of archives like medical records, secondary and mediocre historians, statisticians, things you may know Foucault liked more than some seminal works, if you dealt with Foucauldian genealogical analysis. Here we have things similar to archives, which are model cards and release notes. So just to see how the industry tells of its own tale about itself, how it presents it, we'll go through 8 samples just to show you and you to see that nothing new gets in the way, but only instant mantra of quantitative growth and like approximation to quantized version of artificial general intelligence. So we see our newest flagship model, blah, blah, blah. New industry benchmarks for graduate level reasoning. Some abbreviations which you cannot know for sure what they do mean if you are not following reference or if you are not among those who created these forms of assessment. Again, the newest flagship, the most capable and the cost efficient. Okay, but here we have Claude who says the most intelligent model yet. Then we have simultaneous release. It's not just strictly to follow, but as I've said, more arbitrarily taken release notes. You can take any list of release notes as an archive case in Foucauldian sense, and you'll see the same not old, but the same ritournelle, the same story about significant upgrades, world's best coding models, which outperforms all previous models and benchmarks. But here we have yesterday night and the release of 5.2 just in time to confirm all my assertions. They are just as if they were following this critique and telling, yes, we speak exactly that and we do exactly that. We do better, fast, yet the most powerful and the best benchmark results, as you can see. Again, here we are drifting into field of even more esoteric stuff of thought, which is known as benchmarks. So yeah, here you can just check it. Significant improvements in general intelligence. Just see that everyone claims they are approximating general intelligence. So now we have generality redefined, which I will speak slightly later. So here are the results on benchmarks. The first column is like 5.2, this new model. The second is 5.1, I suppose. So we see just some slightly abbreviated names of benchmarks, especially significant is RC AGI 1 and 2, because these are considered the most problematic for contemporary AI. Also, we have like examples of sorry. Cannot chronically variable tasks. Again, we have the term defined just for convenience for us not to bother ourselves with things like what does this actually mean, like economically valuable tasks or things of this kind. So we see again GDP val, like another abbreviation. Sorry. So yeah. A moment, please. No, I don't. Yeah. So chronically valuable tasks. Okay. I can understand why it doesn't work. Yeah. Sorry. Oh. Okay, so so here we have like another figure of another graphical curve. Now here are the most illustrative part concerning benchmarking, because here again you can see like hours of human baseliner time. What does it mean? Matter evaluation results. Okay, we may try to understand what it is. No sooner than we also see to this depiction of some decimal numbers, comparisons, and all that, I should remind you, is actually considered or is said to be such the measurements of generality of intelligence. This is not even something comparable to IQ tests, which are doubtful for humans. But, well, these things are doubtful themselves because they redefine effectively what we mean by the concept of intelligence or by generality. Okay, we've seen like matter, what it is. We can go to the website of matter and they would explain us that matter is actually a set of tasks for RE bench and H cast, which are themselves, as you can see, time horizons that approximately, and so on and so forth. So to understand what is matter, we should understand what is Hcast and RAD and not RAD but RE bench. As you can recall, there is a term human baseliners. What are they? Here we have the explanation, if we can take it as explanation, like human time for the autonomous capabilities. We have 189 tasks. We don't know what tasks are meant here because there is no appendix. Of them, some were successfully baselined. What does the word baseline means? I don't know, because I copied just the whole page to which OpenAI refer as the explanation. They say like, if you want to know what are these esoteric terms, here is disambiguation, but this is just another chapter of another book of spells, So additional details, eventually we see it in the end, about what is HCAST baseline data, we can find in paper which introduces HCAST. So to get to HCAST, to get what is human baseline, to get what is matter, you have start from the paper which introduces CAST, perhaps, or in any other order, because this is not only question. For example, SSH to access the tasks VM or VS Code. This closely reminds the case which Andrew Karpathy, when he was a PhD student of Fei Li, the author, the professor who have created effectively with her team the ImageNet, when he tried himself just for fun to categorize the images as they are proposed to be categorized for visual reasoning models. His own verdict was, I have got bored on the 200 of images, and I have became rather good at classification of niche dog breeds. Yeah. Another telling example concerning let's say infidelity of benchmarks. Again, concerning the claim and assumption that they must measure the generality and general intelligence of the model and not its imitation. I just highlighted this for you to have no doubts that I was a participant, and as you can see by ranking, 1% of contribution to this benchmark called Humanity's Last Exam was mine. And first of all, this is from the paper, from the preprint from arXiv, which I co-authored, so I can use it. These two small remarks I have drawn by my crooked handwriting, just as a minor thing, that when they say like blind peer review by experts, basically we indeed had our names, both experts who reviewed our questions after the models failed to answer them. As you can see, this is a whole pipeline. And our names and their names were like you can see it on the left part, like 2KMF, 4 symbols only. But I have noticed that my questions were instantly positively reviewed, no matter what the domain, quantum physics, philosophy, by the same anonymized persons. So they just liked, they have their own favorites. They picked them and well, put them are their good assessment, as in my case, or on the same grounding, they could have picked, like those whom they didn't like. Although I only benefited from them, I nevertheless, all my experience of being the part of Humanities Last Exam, I criticize it now because well, there are fairly unexpected points of critique from philosophical point of view. So here I just highlighted for you again to see the demands that are declared by the organizers who are were KAIS and I forgot the second one, but they have clients from American Ministry of Defense and so on. They work with data sets from Palantir, from battlefields from here in Ukraine. So we're serious guys. They even gave us from 500 to $5,000 per those who are like tops. So yeah, financial issues and so on and so forth. But what I want you to see that this is rather strict set of demands, and this has a benevolent impression. But they forgot to add a small thing, that we were limited in our possibility to write the correct answer for model. We are limited to 42 characters. So here you won't find any mentioning of this, but that's absolute scalar absurdity. If my question, for example, demands 43 characters, especially if this is formulas which were demanded to be delivered in LaTeX notation. LaTeX notation adds additional symbols. They do not accept like superscript pasted as symbol, because I have shortcuts which effectively transform some combinations of meaningless symbols to special symbols, because I use it for work. This was forbidden. So you can see I couldn't even finish the phrase for demonstration. Like, imagine with LaTeX. No, 0 characters left. So we were essentially additionally curtailed in what we can ask the models. But then some New York Times or who else, Wikipedia, say like, yeah, this benchmark has punched the models. None can pass it. Like the highest result is 38% for Gemini 3. I think after the release of GPT 5.2, the result will change a little bit, but you can see that essentially this is just the same bunch of quantized uh, assessment. Again, just deleted all the text for you to just to be sure that there is no any reference to this limitation to 42 characters. So now academic degree intelligence should be measured, let's say, in this interval. But what effectively is is dismissed here are the messy qualitative aspects of understanding of reasoning, because as you can see, everything is translated into the language of loss curves, parameter counts, score percentiles, which are picked from hundreds of benchmarks and tasks to evaluate on, and it remains unclear actually what exactly can we learn when we read phrases like you have seen, like the latest GPT iteration shows 50 54.6% on MMLU benchmark against 51 and 35 of its predecessor, or how exactly should we measure more against even more against real and real world tasks and unrelated to the real world queries, because well, uh, it's too many subjective judgment and subjective predicament in such matters, which are not even tried to be defined from the viewpoint of the authors. It just proclaimed this means measures this. These tasks are real world. So this is how episteme works. From the position of power, it redefines things. We'll come back to these ideas, to this definition. So yeah, these questions actually entail even more fundamental ones, like, well, whether the benchmarks as they are given in their predominating form can provide any robust evaluation tools at all, whether they measure intelligence or whether they measure intelligence with different logical stresses, you can see, or at least whether they can distinguish what is a feature of intelligence or its reproduction, or is this only a counterfeit emulation. That is, these questions are dropped and ignored. And as you can see, the most central concept, generalization, generality of intelligence, which we can understand here as a second order meta ability to robustly handle novel situations or dynamic situations outside the training distribution, OOD. This remains unfathomable as well as, well, even the models show some increasing results. What re-emerges from this quantized translation is a redefined or quantized generality, the understanding of which is arguably conflated, I mean, generality conflated with a problem solver that does well on a broad set of narrow qualitative tests. One may object that, but we see some dynamics, something changes. Yes, I will call this just optimization, because yes, it's better to have all 9 games on one cartridge of your Sega Mega Drive from childhood, but not 9 cartridges, because, well, it's too much in terms of space. One can break and so on and so forth. But actually, what happens then here? Yes, we have all 9 games, and we have also all 9,000 games with this. But these 9,000 games are actually those 9 games. This is a rough analogy, but I mean, like, from the very beginning of the history of artificial intelligence, for sure, this was like a common sense truth. To have computer vision, SIGINT, signal intelligence, ELINT, electronic intelligence, pattern recognition, speech recognition, have them in one agent. This is convenient. This is the dream of venture capitalists and military and nation states, who were the first bankrollers and donators of datasets from mugshots to DARPA's financial powerings, which have helped the AI scientists to go through winters. This is obviously a thing desired, but nothing new arises from here. That is the main problem, because in terms of whether we have here reasoning or its simulation, we are not far from symbolic AI. We are in things we far. We'll get to it. So you may recall or forget by this moment that the yesterday's release of GPT-5.2 have scored on this last AGI2, ARC AGI2 52 and 9%. Why I have brought this? Because brought this back because no one other than Elon Musk, in his October's post in this year, have claimed that Grok 5, which we don't know, which is trained by Colossus, has a precisely 10% probability chance of becoming AGI. Interesting that this comes after XAI's CEO made critical remarks about particularly Sam Altman, who is CEO of OpenAI, calling his claims of a kind reckless and remarkably juggling with numbers. But what is fascinating here is that Musk's own prediction about these 10% was made after his Grok achieved, now only, but at that moment it was the highest result, 15 and 9 results on the benchmark ARC-AGI version 2 semi-private. I don't know what's semi-private actually. Almost twice as many as those at that moment leaders who were Claude Opus 4, 8 and 6%, and O3 of OpenAI, 6 and 5%. So it's actually remarkable debates. Just as half a year ago, Musk was AI doomer. Now he hardly ever recalls when he was like Yudkowsky telling things like if some have seen the latest book by Yukovsky and his co-author, if anyone builds it, everyone dies. But my only review is one word: if. Okay, but also it's equally elusive to grasp actually to what extent these all architects of these Scala arms race believe in their own definitions and benchmarking results, and how much of these claims serve marketing and self-promotional causes, so-called bench marketing, as some critics have called it. But not only release notes, model cards, benchmark nature are the evidence of this conflation with quantized intelligence or its converted form, or the true understanding. We just can take a sample of names of contemporary startups which are smaller than Anthropic, Meta, and so on. Like I forgot to put them here, alas. But next AGI, AGI CSS, AGI Inc., AGI Edge Runners, AGI for Good, Safe Superintelligence, or Thinking Machines Lab. This for sure is not an exhaustive list, just to name a few. And okay, if any of them would have been out of step, with this great computational order, transformers, more data, and so on and so forth, inflation, okay, we may say like, oh, these are outliers. They try to make their own way through it. Perhaps they deserve to at least pretend to bear the name in the title AGI, but mostly this is just aping. They just aping from one another, and like apes, they ape this from the elders or from authorities, apes, human apes, and so on and so forth. But yeah, this is only just audacious name for another feed-forward transformer attention combo, trained on n trillion tokens, and yeah, everyone just makes, as they say, AGI closer. To be more precise, in more philosophical, technical terms, what we observe here so far is the converted forms that come alive. It's a concept which Karl Marx introduced it in Deutsch, verwandelte Form, in his addenda to the work theories of surplus value. Very, very archive-like work, very boring, so-called fourth volume of Capital, which was like his own notes to understand political economy history. And this concept, verwandelte Form, he used to refer to numerous permutations of capital with the intention of description of a relatively simple things, how a wrong understanding of some entity, or a wrong grasping of concept, or a wrong misconception of something, of an object, of misunderstanding of relations, of any entity, from, as I said, from social relations to material objects, how this thing is conceived in minds, by means of these minds acting in the real world, how this thing makes its way through from the realm of ideas, I mean, like bad ideas, erroneous ideas, misunderstanding, ideologically biased representation, especially because starting from their first work, I mean, Marx and Engels' first collective work, they always strictly, and I think very relevantly up to today, defined ideology as a false consciousness. So yeah, ideologically biased representation is a representation of thing in false consciousness. So how these things make their way from Platonic ideas or Platonic flawed ideas, to physical realm, becoming an ontologically independent hostile entity to what it similarly represents, just as pseudoscience once did. it doesn't need to be parasitic on science. I have defended my PhD thesis on demarcation problem. I can speak here very confidently, one of the few topics I can. It seems to be parasitic on science, but so far it doesn't need it. It's just ontological independent entity. Whatever our motives and whatever were the first, scraps between proto-science, pseudoscience, and science in 19th century, because this was perhaps the period when they were the hardest to demarcate, like phrenology, physiognomy, and so on and so forth. Half Quaker science, half spells. So yeah, what I want to say is that that here we speak about plurality form as a hostile entity to what it similarly represents, to what it says it is, while being something else from the start. From the very start, it appears to the physical realm from the heads. And how eventually this erroneous form in Marx's theories of surplus value, capital in its social forms of ossification, transformation, ossification, melting down, and eventualization in surplus value, and surplus extraction as one of its incarnation. So how this all erroneous form of being, as Marx put it, supplants and replaces the genuine entity by itself, and later perceived as a true and initial and the only thing to which we refer by this notion. So like virtually eliminating the genuine entity, be it concept, relation, or whatever else. Here we have concepts for this part of my speech. So this all follows the fallacious Texas sharpshooter logic of benchmarking as a method of measuring and defining what it measures as episteme. So the position of dictating, we are measuring this thing, but what is this thing, like generality? It's a thing which is measured by this benchmark, or if they can give any definition. No one would come and fight them. So you should randomly here you train a giant model on whatever, then you can draw targets, bullseyes around the best results on some type of tasks, and less obviously this can actually lead us to the Darwinism again as a in setting it of as a converted form of Darwinism, or Darwinism in the worst sense, to finally get over with the second part of Scalar Darwinism. First of all, this refers to the market rewards for slightest performance gains on tasks that are useful, like code generation or medical QA. Even those in such critiques as the author of recent book, I'm not sure it's actually visible, Madhumita Murgia, the book Codependence. So even she, with her acidic position, had to admit that medical AI is indeed something that can make change in places where where people are already down the baseline of medical services. So here rewards for even these percentiles are huge, and they lead companies to power hundreds of millions of dollars or billions to bolster scaling paradigm. Because if big tech doesn't see any, or doesn't want to see, or thinks that this is the only way, anything beyond the scale, then what do we want from venture capitalists, which are basically blind because it's even harder for them than cryptocurrency with its own merit factors like GitHub stars or even meme capitals. Factors which are influencing the value of AI startups, which are understood best of all, or 100% or 90% or so, are understood by tech bros, and only then come the venture capitals. More than 40% of which, I mean, global venture capitals are currently invested into AI industry by official estimations. So, in turn, those who have the access to the most resources to these milliards, they build data-centric infrastructures. They own, or they are first in line to buy from NVIDIA or to create their own designer chips, like not only GPU, but we now have NPU, neural processing chip, LPU from linguistic processing chip, and not on tensor from Google are more or less common now. So yeah, designer chips for compute, large, high quality, and proprietary data sets. They can afford, for example, to pay for copyrighted versions, or like Anthropic did, and were filed by citizens with unclear outcome, filed for buying 1 million physical books, and after scanning they burned them in order not to violate copyrights. They didn't donate them, they just destroyed them physically, physical copies, after scanning them, after training Claude. So what we have in effect, obviously, is that well, positive feedback loop, classical example, because the biggest players who build the biggest already clusters and own them, produce the biggest, the fattest, the most trophic models, become, by the laws of, so to say, winner takes it all dynamic, they entrench themselves. They entrench into economy of the country. They become quasi-state actors, like Microsoft in Argentina, when they have offered a relatively cheap program of helping to prevent early pregnancy, which was one of the biggest social problems because of abortion's criminalization at that moment. Less strict than now. Persecution of males who participate in gang rapes, yes, of underage, and not only underage women, low consent ages, so on and so forth. So Microsoft came as saviors, and also they came as, like ministry from abroad, which for some time before another government was elected, they decolonized them on the state level, because on the one hand they really helped, on the other hand they data mined the poorest, as it usually goes with the winner take it all dynamics. This condition actually has two profound effects. I mean, this overall situation. First is that we see this blind race toward point X without any idea where this X is, like Nietzsche in his tale about movement of us since Copernicus toward X. But since Copernicus, we at least thought we know where we are moving. We admit that we are moving nowhere, and here we cannot even accept this. So we take this as progressive development and advances toward definite objectives where there are no definite objectives, with this breakneck increasing velocity, which is perceived as an evidence for knowing what we are doing without knowing that. This is a scalarity effect, so to speak, and its amplified version, or a consequence, is actually what we have when we recall Mark Fisher, K. Punk's capitalist realism, a mindset that gives away the complicity, this complicity between ideological smokescreens of capitalism. Zizek also called it the illusion of post-ideology, or the fake desert of ideology in his middle years works. That you see the desert, but it's a mirage. Actually, there is plenty of ideologies, but capitalism wants to make you think that there are none. So here is this complicity between these smokescreens and these deceptive feelings beget by Scalar Darwinism, that there is no actual alternatives beyond the status quo. Finally, we move to the slides, because now I want to deal not with ideological and rhetorical or heuristical figures beyond the scalarity, because from the very start it had indeed grounding, because in computer sciences you cannot just do anything completely without brain, like Elon Musk. Elon Musk is living proof that a person can live after the brain was amputated. But it began as indeed results scientific research in computer sciences, and we will deal with this thing, which is known today as a first era of neural scaling laws, because we are now told that we are in the second era. What a shameful mistake, family. Sorry, I was in a rush with. I was writing this. So a ground break. The grounding has been laid in, as you can see, in seminal article of 2020, 5 years ago, Scaling Laws for Neural Language Models by a research collective. So what this article postulated was the observation of some correlations, because law here is used like in any law which is related to technology. We have no laws like in physics, like in natural sciences. We have regularities which tend to be observable for some time. Then they usually come to full or partial inefficiency, as we can see with Moore's law, which postulated that with each the lesser the size of chips, twice they are more powerful, if I'm not mistaken. But now even this thing, for instance, is actually declining, because as I have said, we wish technology to work as laws of nature, but obviously we haven't to have it working on these rates and be instantaneous. We have to break the laws of thermodynamics. Okay, so here we are 5 years before this decline, so to speak, and just 2 years after the so-called Google 8 published their seminal paper, Attention is All You Need, which was inspired by awful British band Beatles, equally as by the movie Arrival by Denis Villeneuve, because one of the co-authors was actually a Ukrainian guy from Kharkiv, and great fan of that movie. So the idea of attention was partially inspired by the language of Abbott and Costello in the movie. So neural scaling laws referred to a family, or to three, actually, empirically observed and mathematically representable regularities that relate the performance of deep learning artificial neural network to the scale on 3 axes of advance, meaning scaling up. Either this is the size of the model, so it's first of all parameters, training data quantity, data set volume, and data points, size of each data point and the number of data points. For validation, training is the most crucial at the first era, and test. And computational budget. This is like physical GPU, the hardware, or compute. Also here, this third axis, this includes floating point operations like flops expanded during optimization. So subsequently refined by other labs, this means like the findings of Kaplan and his fellows have received the confirmation by other AI labs, which is also, as you know, is one of the most prominent criteria of the progression of science or progressive research program, when the results are reproducible or have their independent confirmation or are discovered independently, like this was the case with the non-Euclidean geometries, which were postulated independently by persons in 19th century. One more mistake. What a shame on me. So these refinements by other labs show that with all other aspects of the training pipeline, if we have them unchanged, it means architecture, transformers, optimizers, data distribution, loss function, the test error, or more generally, we may say that any performance metric, which we discussed, monotonic performance metrics, would follow simple pattern of which are observed in the so-called power laws decay. Power law is more general reference to set of indeed laws observed in complex system studies, in natural systems, in cosmology. So this tendency, this correlation, simply is very, very, very alike to what we call laws. That is why they are not just neural correlation or neural scaling correlations. They are neural scaling laws. So general idea here was obviously inspired by statistical approaches to AI development, which gained upper hand over symbolic or good old-fashioned AI paradigm collapse. And with this paradigm undergoing the second winter, we know that well, until the middle of 90s, the so-called breakthrough, but actually just a loud event, which was heralded as AI defeats the Deep Blue defeats Kasparov. Yeah. So during the 20 and 10s, 10 years before scaling laws were scientifically postulated, there were presuppositions like AlexNet and the victory of AlexNet, the neural network, which demonstrated ostensibly the absolute superiority of deep learning as a paradigm, because this actually followed one of the three possible axes of scaling up. They scaled up data to the unthinkable extent, which became possible only because we have had internet, GPUs, and when very big number of low-wage workers who under the payments and guidance from Fei Li and her team created the dataset ImageNet, which was actually not the original idea. It was inspired by 80s WordNet, which CIA and other intelligence services tried to, well, donated to try to get to more decent TTS or STT models, speech to text and text to speech, which is actually a problem even now if you try to decipher some recording of punk song. Even Whisper Large version 3 would hallucinate until now. Even with English, I'm not speaking about other languages. So yeah, okay. What I want to say is that throughout 20s and until late 2024, last year, the results robustly vindicated the hypothesis and justified this approach Yes, the approach which can be now actually it's time for me to look what I have added to my slide because I forgot about it. Actually, this is just an illustration, a mathematical representation of what I have been saying. So it's rather easy just for you to maybe to remember, because this would reappear N, D, and C. So D is for data or tokens, N is for number of parameters, and C is for number of compute, which are obviously non-convertible, and therefore for each of them were three different functions, which I decided not to put here because this wouldn't have added much more clarity. But this table is actually a good illustration of what I have said just a minute ago about vindication of the hypothesis and justification of monotonicity and developmental pattern, because first and fourth was made by the same research collective, but we here see just as years passed by, we had almost quantitatively scalarly reproduced results for each of the three axes and for them in joint. What does it mean here? This first, for example, first line is about if we increase model parameters, we have an exponent gains, as you can see, from 7 to 12%, almost the same if we would increase or scale up our training tokens or data points. The same is if we increase physical GPUs, and even more we have if we do joint scaling up on all three axes. Yes, so LLMs at this time, as you remember, after the second half of 2024, but actually research events took place even earlier with very interesting and strange results, like Llama 2, which is now not even considered as a language model because it's very stupid, showed absolute superiority over 1,900, almost 2,000 people in tests on TOM, theory of mind, stuff like basic emotional intelligence, spectacularly failing on other tasks. The same was with GPU 3, which haven't been publicly released by that time. This was early, the first half of 2022. But after then, we have LLMs toppling leaderboards in reading, task comprehension, language inferences, completion, knowledge quizzes, vision models that were scaled up, and first of all in this second part, trading tokens have approached human accuracy, and even as they say they're superior to baseline and far beyond. And well, we have visual reasoning, we have autonomous driving now, even more sophisticated systems of classification of objects, categories that humans that ordinary human hardly would achieve, because, well, this needs training. So they are powered by enormous compute, and yes, we also had the reappearance of reward models of machine learning and reinforcement learning agents, whose performance in StarCraft or Minecraft was deemed superhuman officially. Again, epistemic redefinition. So the overall impression was that we finally have escaped from the Damocles sword of the 90s, the most nefarious theorem, which computer scientists didn't like, no free lunch theorem, which postulated that with the course of time, the efficiency of algorithm, which showed efficiency on some class of tasks, would stop being more efficient than random guessing. That's a doom of any attempts of universal kingdom come and generality and so on until now. I mean, it's not cancelled. So what I might say that I will skip this part, I suppose. So the momentum here was enormous. The whole edifice worked as this Barks Darwinism, again reference to Marx, Barks communism, the way Marx and Engels called Народная воля and Nietzsche's version of communism from Barks. So here we have Barks Darwinism, which ensured the survival of those who are entrenched, of the biggest models, of those who could afford to wait until their research group would replicate all that their market competitors have replicated, like chain of thoughts and so on and so forth, or just survival of the biggest but not the smartest, obviously, models. We may even call this, I coined the term, backpropagation paragenetics. So that any new feature that the model has acquired was always replicated, always reintroduced and reinvented just for keeping up with Jonas's. Then any actual, reflective or deliberate movement towards something as AGI, it should be said to merit of OpenAI that most of these optimization novelties were made by OpenAI and other copied. But since these are not as much as I assume, were qualitative breakthroughs rather than optimization of either ideas that were previously published. Because yes, Google were first to publish the attention. They invented the concept of attention and published this transformer architecture roadmap. But but OpenAI implemented this first because Google own models were like in at that moment were in less focused on this idea of generative pre-trained transformer, because actually the idea of transformers emerged as a problem, as the attempt of solution of machine translation problem. And now we have even separation between neural networks translation and translation models, which are not neural, considered not neural in technical terms. So yeah, so actually Google had another problem of machine translation, because well, 20s were the time of mocking of Google translation. But by that time that they were dealing with this, OpenAI had taken their theoretical research and scaled it up. And so, what else we have to discuss in this part? I suppose we have. You can see these are technical problems which considered to be like coup de grace, the last strike of to the edifice of scaling, some suggested, but actually the scale have prevailed. But we are told that we are in the second era now. The most important proof until the late 2024 were the so-called emergent capabilities, such as multimodality. Because multimodality, yes, again, achieved by ChatGPT, was seemed as a planned developmental step resulted from this joint spendings on all three axes. But actually, it was like more supposed but not planned capability, because there is no scientific hypothesis which effectively explains what was fixed. So all we were talking about here was like the scientists observed this, they fixed this, but they had no explanation, like in physics, no bootstrapping principle, no actual theoretical underpinning of why does it happen. That is why when we are just blindly moving without understanding who is driving and seeing that nobody's driving, the models simultaneously hit the ceiling of performance. That here this means like the diminishing returns, when the spendings were the same, but the gains were from zero to very small gains. So before that, yes, there was a dominating presupposition that we have defeated the no free lunch implications, that we are moving towards something being intelligence. But this was like classical case of self-fulfilling promises of technological hype. The more X, the closer we are to AGI. But everyone has forgotten that AGI doesn't mean, what we have seen, benchmarking, quantization. And even the big tech bros openly admitted, because many of them are not like Musk. Many of them are really good scientists, after all. Anthropic research team have my biggest respect for the groundbreaking methods of, for example, seeing into the black box finally. The research, which is as much technical report as much as it is philosophical tractatus in contemporary philosophy, which is titled On the Biology of Large Language Model, published in this April. Yes, so as researchers, there are a lot of meritable persons among them, but not everyone. But what I want to say is that some tech bros admitted the problem. Some tried to play it out, like Dario Amodei, who has said, I will quote, human level AI is coming in 2026, 2027, if we do not run out of data, scalar position, face cluster scaling limitations, or microchip production disruption due to geopolitical causes, hinting to China. Yes, because I mean China and Taiwan, because Taiwan is the source of 80% of compute. Taiwan workers are supplied by only one manufacturer of production means. I mean, like how do we call it? Okay, machines for production of GPU compute, which is in Netherlands. So this is very niche and thin supply chain. But now, as I have said previously, there are designer solutions. So I think what he predicted is not now as screaming as it was just like a year ago, almost a year ago. So evidence has mounted that the smooth scaling gains are slowing. This is the second point which Anthropic CEO have stated, that scaling limitations and skepticism, which was once heretical in this field of drunk and rapid advances, is coming from insiders and investors themselves, because there are no other like venture capitalists like Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, the owners of A16Z, if I'm not mistaken, the venture capital fund. who were super and are super believers in AI, like witnesses of AI, who say that this technology is magic, it will cure anything. They publicly conceded that large language models were hitting a performance ceiling. Andreessen, for example, said that 2 years prior, like in 2022, OpenAI's GPT-3.5 was far ahead of any rival, but by late 2024, quote, sitting here today, their 6 models are on par with that. They are sort of hitting the same ceiling on capabilities. In other words, scaling up was copying this approach, but it didn't bring the results. I mean, in terms of leaps, for example, GPT-2, GPT-3, GPT-3.5. We are really slowed down in terms of the amount of improvement, which is also a quote. So more particularly, researchers, empirical researchers, labs, notice that they have leveling off of the improvements even on their own, their own imaginary world of general intelligence and benchmarks. For example, the movement, first line, and the number of from 6 billion parameters to 60 billion parameters yielded very big jumps, but from 60 billions to 600 billions parameters actually was didn't beget the same 10 more extent effect. So asymptote seemed to be like inside. It's comparable to climbing the mountain and then having a broad plateau. And the realization has dawned that like can I understand this about it? Okay, so there is a double occurrence by the early 2025 this year. There is an acknowledgement that there is a sailing to this first era approach. This is why it actually received the name of the title of era, the periodization of era. But cult of scalarity was kept alive because a new path was proposed when the old metric of progress, like training a single model and 3 axes of advance, began to falter. This not clever but fascinating move was and is an attempt to change dimensions. If these all things were somehow related to space, either vector space or physical space, now they have switched to time. I think here we should make a little break and perhaps to hear your interventions, your questions, and then finish this up because the most part I think I have told already, and I'm speaking like an hour and a half. So please. Any questions, comments for now? Okay, then let's have 5-minute breaks, and in 40, I'll continue. Okay, I think I have to speed up because I haven't even noticed that I have 24% on my laptop and no light, no electricity has returned so far, as you can see. Okay. The desktop. Uh, Strange. Uh, mm, I understood my failure. Sorry. Mm, uh, okay, be like this. Oh, so the first question is okay. These are like technical additions to the problems I have outlined already. Then came like the proofs that the no free lunch theorem has been disposed, and the perhaps from here I would pay attention to the fifth issue, because this is just what I was telling about any technological laws in brackets, like law-like correlations, that further research has shown that there are correlations between resources and performance, but because they are not laws like we have in physics, they didn't imply causation from the very start. And these diminishing returns were just the consequence of wrong perception of regularities for causation. And hence, we had migrated, so to speak, or transitioned to this so-called second era of scaling laws. I don't have much visual information, but it's more like I will tell about it. So, what is this idea of second era? The most telling case is now familiar, you know, I think COT, chain of thought prompting, where the model is encouraged to generate a longer step-by-step reasoning chain internally before it gives a final answer, internally or ostensibly before implementation of the of a chain of thought as an instrument, again by OpenAI. Uh, so the other solutions or like palliatives again reminds us this image of many cartridges for Sega, or all games on one cartridge, because the solutions included like enabling additional API plugins, the so-called MCP tools introduced by Anthropic, which are now known as USB Type-C for language models, that they call it. They are also case exemplifications in methods like self-consistency by majority voting. When you run model many times on some tricky task and take the most common result, which appears more. This follows the scalar hypothesis that the correct answer will appear more frequently. Which is not often the case, because it depends again on training data. Because data-devouring ontology had never actually disappeared. In these approaches share a common principle: you allocate more computation and time per one task to let the model explore, so to speak, the solutions more thoroughly or more frequently. In other words, if one forward pass of a neural network can only do that little that it does with respect to diminishing returns, give it 10 passes or 100, and effectively by this increase for sure inference budget per query, per task, because it doesn't matter how many runs have the model made. Essentially, it is still dealing with one query. Advocates of approach have framed it as extending the horizon of what they define as reasoning, or its proxy, as we have in fact, or its converted form, as we can say, borrowing the term from Marx. Instead of instantaneous answers, model now cogitates in microseconds, even in seconds of compute, which is effectively actually an eternity or two in CPU cycles, central processing unit cycles, because they are well very very slow and very painstaking and are undesired. So GPUs are like good, all the designer chips are good, and CPU cycles are not good, but there are still some models that cannot be optimized to run on GPU and are CPU only ones, especially when we speak about CUDA environment. I mean Windows, because not all models support CUDA. But this is considered as a way for better results. What is better, again, here is benchmarking improvements with some tricks like reinforcement learning from human feedback and so on. Initial result, again, was a scientific proof, which I reference in the text which was given as a reading, that just a prompting model without any mechanics, just saying it, think step by step, indeed significantly up to 50% improved the accuracy in complex benchmark. So by the late 2024, when everyone started to tell about the fire in the hole, the narrative was that we are now in this so-called second era. We are not scaling parameters, we're not scaling training tokens or compute. We do, but the main is to focus. Now, main directive of this Scala order of computation was to focus on scaling computation time. So the second era, I mean, now we're still in the need of the same massive computer resources, because models run, as I've said, multiple reasoning passes per one query, or engage in agentic tool use, like using internet search, which means effectively that the main model, so to speak, makes a call to API. API makes a query under call, and then it calls back in jargon terms, it calls back to the main model who made this call, and then the model answers to the user. So these approaches actually require at least the same order, but some say even more, because inference with extensive chain of thought reasoning for several minutes, for example, can invoke dozens of the magnitudes of which was spent at the time of the so-called first era of scaling law. So some say this even 100 times more compute of spendings. So while this side of scaling shifted from training to inference, so this was like training phase, pre-training phase, now it's post-training phase. Meta-ethical and epistemological edges, which is more and more and more and more, are the same, basically. So the great computational order as a belief that powering more computation will inevitably yield progress was quickly restored after this brief wobble on the border of this and previous years. We even may follow the metaphors of cybernetic culture research unit and call this an attempt of time sorcery or commodification of future time. And well, first era, we say, was about devouring space, more GPUs, more data, tokens, and so on. The second is about devouring time, effectively buying the future by spending extra compute in the present at the post-training phases. So there is a transition from those pre-training phases to post-training test time of today, which is just a reconceptualization of how computational resources are allocated or distributed explicitly as mechanisms of this time sorcery, as a means of purchasing additional temporal temporal resources within the same inference and with no more tasks than it was previously. I mean, like per tasks spendings. So we have time as asset, not just a figure of speech or my emotional claim or metaphor, because AI companies began massively selling this concept. For example, in the middle of 2025, OpenAI update describes new models that think step by step or run with these new tools, MCP tools, as if they have been given a longer attention span or working memory, as if they had memory. In technical terms, time scaling is basically extension of, say, computational resources, or majority voting, for example. They have exemplified, just mentioned this. So Anthropic named its series Claude after an assistant metaphor, and by version 4, they emphasized in their release notes, again, archive files of our time, extended reasoning and multi-step workflow. The promise now was that, like, allowing more time for thinking, we will nevertheless, by this same way, without without architectural changes, reconsidering approaches, without turning back to genuine understandings, we still are cracking towards AGI. Well, this is how scale captured intelligence up to today. Because, well, all these speculations with time, this creates a wager that extended computational duration will yield qualitative superior results without empirical confirmations, that this would just follow the patterns implied by dialectics as developmental theory, as it is posited by Marx and Hegel, when the straw breaks the spine of a camel. It closely resembles, at the same time, the discourse of what is known today as promissory capitalism, because modern industry attempts this exploitation of futurity and treats time itself as one of assets, just as capitalism do. Generally, it's promissory capitalism. It sells such future, but it constantly, at the same time, differs. That's indeed a dialectic, but not of a good kind. So it sells the future, but defers its realization to some indeterminate later ons in multiple. This is not a mistake of speech. So this reframing carries its own questionable assumptions and risks. For example, the approach and attitude that defer the fundamental problems of qualitative aspects of intelligence into indefinite future, really by just make more steps, is a speculative wager, again, which assumes that qualitatively superior results may emerge if we just let the machine grinding longer on the task without any empirical proofs for the claim and any demarcation between the imitation of process as it was in 1954 or after Dartmouth workshop or now. Sometimes models indeed improve the results, again, measured by scale, by benchmark. Sometimes they don't. And we just spend CPU and GPU and more energy, more water, more carbon emissions, slower responses, and higher expense per query. But getting no farther than Deep Blue with its millions of positions by brute force. Just the way the brute force is, the brute force issues of the past, like combinatorial burst caused by the insufficient power of computers. Like we just fastened this leap in the gap and the issues of combinatorial burst and things like that. But doubling down on computation, we also just have this phenomenon of entrenchment of the same big players in advantage, the winners, and the monoculture as a result, as a consequence, the monoculture of methods that the first era did without any actual changes at the industry level. There is very small amount of qualitatively defiant projects. One of them was in origin like small language models, which are claimed to be the potential future of agentic AI. But again, who are making this claim? If you have noticed, this is a research collective led by NVIDIA. NVIDIA have their own Scalar ambitions in this, and their architectures of their models are not truly novel, because in all respect they are the same transformers, same attention, but effectively expropriating the optimizations of DeepSeek researchers. As you may recall, DeepSeek arose just in times of the crisis of the first era by the end of the previous year. And what effectively was DeepSeek, not again novelty, because mixture of expert is still the same implementation, because there are some deep learning algorithms like Boltzmann machines, less famous, less usable, which do effectively the same. That there's, how would I say, mixture of expert does. But what really was novel was optimization of the resources usage. DeepSeek was a proof of concept that you can use even worse and more old compute, lesser amount or number of these, use lesser layers, less neurons, and have the same results. So the small language models, as NVIDIA sees them, is just this optimization intersection or added to the order of things. One of indeed interesting and maybe promising results is perhaps the so-called raw cow language models. These are recursive neural networks without attention mechanism. They are not too bad. They are even capable of batch generation. I mean, like when you give one model a task and put it, like make it simultaneously 10 times. Interesting to observe, but without any definite conclusion or resolving so far. So far, we are again seeing the same OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Amazon, IBM, sitting on these war chests that they have gained on cloud compute, and no alternative path actually is being seriously explored. Similar scale by both proponents and the so-called AI doomers, who take it for granted as proven that particularly this way of or paradigm of the development of AI is the only or assure or one of the assured ways of achieving AGI. They just on the other side of this landscape, but they are part of this landscape by just speculating that these contemporary developments are surely leading us to the catastrophe, as it is put by Yudkowsky, the loudest doomer and proponent the idea that it will kill us all. But as I think, to assume this, we should at least see some signs that we are not in a situation of observing another case of what I call floppy disk culture, like battle axe culture, archaeologically. Detached cultures, because like floppy disk or pager represent the dead end branch of development of technology. They just came to dead end and were superseded or outcompeted by more decent representatives of their own genus, like Homo sapiens and other Homo genus representatives, like Lomacvi 3 toolmakers or all the one toolmakers, metaphorically speaking. So again, we return to this idea of capitalist realism, where we have the pervasive ideology and apparent feeling that there is no system that is possible, qualitatively different systems beyond the status quo. In AI, this is epitomized in what we finally may conclude to has all the presuppositions to call this Scalar Darwinism as a tacit notion that there is no alternative to ever bigger, ever more resource hungry, ever more dimensional hungry deep learning models. And if scalar laws, as originally formulated, faltered, the response is just not to consider a new paradigm, not to try to find a vector alternatives, but to invent a new law-like regularity, which we will call second era, or I don't know, third era, may be not so far, because as you have seen, the first era, to call this era, geological metaphor, but this only 4.5 years. So the goalpost just shifted from this size space scaling to time scaling. And the message of the industry or the landscape, the edges, is so far the same. Don't worry, the path to AI dominance still lies in pumping more resources. We are just relocating resources, optimizing them, and pumping them in different dimension, not direction. So philosophically speaking, this is fascinating because this underscores how deeply our conception of progress of AI is tied to this quantitative growth without any qualitative counterweight, or how deeply the understanding of intelligence is now captured in this quantitative scala magnitude. If one axis saturates, just find another axis. But the underlying belief of Scalar Darwinism remains unquestioned by the whole landscape, as I have said, on both sides of the picture. I suppose here I will stop because the other part would be effectively the one we would discuss during the second session, and perhaps for now someone would like to make their own inputs toward what I have already delivered today. So, any comments, questions? Yes, please.
Hello.
Yes, yes, I hear.
Thank you for your overwhelmingly exciting presentation. And as I understand, your main object of criticism of contemporary AI technological landscape is that it do not concern itself with innovation in different non-consumer spheres and just throws computational power away to facilitate its own growth for the sake of the growth. But I agree and understand, but in the wake of different strains of techno-negativism and AI negativity in general, I would like to ask you, what do you suggest the technology itself can be reappropriated, reused, maybe in some cosmological sense? I am aware that in China and in general in East Asian countries, both generative AI and AI usage can be associated not with big capital and its destructive potential on the planet and economy, but as some kind of futuristic way of achieving some societal types of ready-made utopias. So in the wake of your presentation and your criticisms, what can you say about this re-emerging, maybe non-human ways of understanding this technology without corporate, or maybe if the corporate control can be transcended or reappropriated or somehow be decommodified?
Okay, thank you for the question. This actually must be the second session topic dedicated to just fighting these ways, because I would suggest the eventual premise for the second session is that people often think about which ethics of AI should we follow, like like meta ethics or deontology or utilitarianism, but they seldom, at least on the West, we are seldom questioning which ethics should it be in terms of politically, like democratic, liberal, right-wing, or anarchist. My utopian vision is that it should be anarchist ethic, but to build it, we should, overcome the possibility of taking AI into the tunnels, as Mikhail Brunila proposes in his e-flux publication, which was among the readings. Like to take AI into the tunnels sounds very very good in the wake of dark internet forest theory and so on and so forth, mass surveillance, but it must be technically feasible solution, not just utopian. And this all this I assume to transfer to the second session. That's
Thank you.
Yes, that's my improvisation, given that I have only 5% left, but I suppose if there are some replica questions, we can take one.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I do.
Okay. So trying to follow along with what you're stating, I see like a parallel in the way benchmarks and markers sort of give more depth to the sort of esoterical role of the development of AI and the AI bubble from an oligarchical stance. And precisely what you're stating, I think it's the common concern. Is not just a question about the ethics on how to reproduce AI, but rather a technical solution to the way this is made esoteric, which I see it commonly if you check on the history of empires. I mean, that's what secret societies do, quote unquote, to keep an empire steady on a single place. Like the idea of, I don't know, the Kabbalah or those sort of esoteric indicators. And in that sense, there is a difference with AI, since AI has this notion that there's always the open source, right? That's sort of like the paradigm which goes along the introduction of DeepSeek and all that. I was wondering, what is your stance on open source among the current state of Scalar Darwinism, as you call it? Can it provide us something technical to go against this commodification, or is it something else, or is it worthless?
Actually, my personal view is that open source so far would eventually be rendered useless, as it was the case with the LLM arena, if you remember. This was an alternative to benchmarks considered because the users voted and so on and so forth. But not a year passed when the publication went out with a name which was called Leaderboard Illusion, which just consecutively showed how the independent assessment mechanisms failed, again becoming the prey of the same business ontology as Mark Fisher has called the capitalist realism underpinning. Like everything should be ruled like a business enterprise, no matter whether it is school or or hospital. In this case, the prey to market logic or commodification or extraction has the prey is an independent institution. But generally, I'm surely by both hands for the open source ethics, because, well, for some local tasks, I indeed use the AI tools, mostly open source one, because I prefer local running the models. But at the same time, I feel the constraints of local running, because you cannot run, for example, DeepSeek Terminus. You need only 1 terabyte of storage to download it, and I don't know about 200 gigabytes of GPU to run it with glitches. So this is just the problem of technical solutions we have right now. But generally, I'm supporting the idea of open source, open weights, even because open source in the model is one thing when they make it foundational. Make it from scratch and opening weights is a little bit another, because I have even my own from scratch gathered script model. If you're interested in just ping me after the seminar, I can send you, which is not, for example, uploadable to the Hugging Face, because Hugging Face, despite being an open community, they nevertheless have Transformers Python module, which doesn't recognize my model because I have made it up. It is a resemblant of GPT-2 and something in the middle between Llama and GPT-2. I have called it Blur is a genetic opera, but on my own local runs, it worked only after I made my own corrupted, hacked version of Transformers and just made a smuggling of the Python file, which said like Bloris was always here in library of Transformers, but he wasn't. So there are actually no intentions against open weights and open source, but there are doubts that this would be a viable solution. I am very pessimistic actually about all this. Pessimistic and skeptical, because we may indeed, I firmly believe in this, we may be indeed in the situation that when the sailing won't be broken anymore, and that the model will reach some peak, and then as some publication from 2023 in Nature suggests, the degradation would begin and the models would at best be at the level of like 2022 and even worse. Like the same thing they called MAD, MAD referring to the rabies in cows. This thing which was happening to old GANs, generative adversarial neural networks, which were very good at realistic generation, but very unstable and quickly degraded. I'm not, not excluding the possibility that GPTs of the latest iterations would hit the ceiling and either would be performing worse or would be just rolled in and how would you say it? Taken out of the deployment, mass deployment, won't be in use. There's nothing actually that ensures that this won't happen.
I got you. Sick. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I've got 3%. I suppose if any thoughts, comments, or questions would arise from you, you can send them by email, or if we have Discord chat. If we don't, we'll create it, and you'll be notified about that. So thank you, everyone, and see you in 2 weeks, I suppose.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.